This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts on the Wire, episode 16. Dmitry Dragilev. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 16 of Experts on the Wire. For a long time, PR, or public relations, has kind of, at least to me, seemed like this mysterious thing. You know, you get a PR company, they somehow magically get you in all these big news sites, and I never quite knew exactly what the value add of a PR company was and why companies couldn't just do that for themselves. Well, it turns out that many businesses can do PR for themselves. And Dmitry Dragilev, who we have on the show today, is going to teach us all kinds of ways that you can leverage PR and take control of it on your own without having to hire a PR company. Now, there are great PR companies out there. I've personally worked alongside a few. And in some cases, you may want a PR company. But in many cases, you should really explore the possibilities of what you can achieve on your own. Now, Dmitry, for example, has helped a company called Polar, which was acquired by Google, go from 0 to 40 plus million page views, all with the power of PR. And he wrote a story about that on the Next Web, which we're going to link to in the show notes at evolvingseo.com/wire. He's going to tell us all kinds of tactical things, but two quick examples are mistakes that people make when pitching PR companies, and also the best way to contact a journalist. So this episode is action-packed with lots of tactical value. So we're going to jump right in to today's conversation with Dmitry Dragilev. Before we get to the actual tactics and everything, can you give me a quick background on yourself?
Yeah, so I got a computer science degree. At the age of, I was pretty young, and I already had a secret clearance. I was working for BAE Systems as a software engineer. And after 3-4 years, I just looked around. I'm like, this is so boring. I love developing stuff, but I wish I was hacking cool little tools that would scrape the web and get some info and intel. I'm writing flight planning software is so boring. I quit my job, sold everything I had, just basically packed up my bags and moved to Silicon Valley. And I did that because this was circa 2007, 2006. And they were heating up pretty fast and at the time there with startups closing funding and all this stuff. And I wanted to get in the game, but all I knew is how to write code, So I showed up. I didn't know anything, but I knew how to write code. So I wrote the script that would scrape Twitter for influencers and would show you who you should contact on any given topic. And my idea was that I would show this to other startups and companies, and they would want me to work with them. And so I started walking around meetups, basically just showing this to people. And that's how I scored my first gig. And then I started doing this type of work. I literally, they were like, that's great. Can you reach out to these influencers journalists? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. And so I would try and think up of clever ways to get a conversation started. I would go into a conference room and I would imitate, reading this email out loud and imitate how they would hear it when I reach out to them. And I would ask them all sorts of stuff, like stupid questions. I would ask them about things they were writing about, personal questions, feedback, advice, anything really to get an email thread going. And that's my beginnings in PR and sort of content marketing.
Wow. So
10 years ago.
Yeah, one thing really led to another. You did this script, which was how to find the influencers. And then the next step naturally was, can you help us contact the influencers, which kind of leads into a basically PR situation.
Yeah. A non-traditional kind of thing, because people are used to hiring PR agencies and being, serious about it, having a big agency represent you, and they have contacts and they get you on CNN and Forbes. This was just so grassroots that, this was startups that couldn't afford to pay $10,000 a month or $7,000 a month. They were just scrappy.
And this was how long ago that you did that?
So this was 2007 or something like that. So 9 years ago, like 8.5 years ago or so.
Okay. And what's very interesting is you mentioned getting a degree. We just discovered 5 minutes ago, we went to the same college, UNH, in New Hampshire, which is a super, I mean, because you've come from all over, Russia and then Silicon Valley and then Boston. And the fact we went to the same school, I think, is kind of hilarious and very cool. So where I was leading with that was, so basically you did this in 2007, 8, and then basically take us up to about the present time. Like, what do you do now? I know you consult and you have, I think, a product. Tell us a little bit about that in a few sentences.
So I, during this time frame, I've consulted a lot of clients. I basically started consulting and went on and on and on and on, and had a number of successes. 2 companies were actually acquired. One of them just acquired by Google late 2014, and the other one was acquired in 2008 by AVG, and another one called Zerb has grown to insane popularity there. The framework called Twitter Bootstrap came out of that firm, but I've had a lot of successes doing PR this way, or I guess content marketing, and so... and
are there any numbers you can attach to that? I know you've written about that in blog posts, but this is where we're setting you up as an expert. I like to do this with all my guests, is really put your best foot forward and give us any kind of juicy details you can about numbers or results.
So for example, Polar, this was a company that was pretty much from 0 to 40 million page views a month. We did that in about 2 years. And the tactic there was very simple. It was just making sure there's really relevant polls are placed right into the articles themselves. So you have a very interesting poll that you add to a breaking news article, such as, Xbox versus PS4, or it could be your iOS 6 versus iOS 7, whatever the subject that's breaking right now in the news. Make sure you have your poll in there. And because they owned the polling mechanism, the software, the widget would have a click back to their article, to their website. And, it took us a lot of tries and a lot of experiments to get there. But once we got there, we established relationships with most publications. And by the time we were acquired, 1 in every 443 or something internet users has at least voted on one of our polls at once.
Wow. So and you wrote an article in detail about how you did this, correct? And we'll link to it.
Yeah, it's on the next web. Yeah, on the next web, if you say Polar, Polar, and then my name, and then the next web, you'll find the article. It's still remarkably, I get at least, a few leads every day from it. Companies that read it and come across it, even though it's like over a year old now, I think, or even more.
That's great. Yeah, we'll link to that in the show notes. So obviously, and I like to kind of compliment my guests. We're obviously, and for the listeners out there, we're talking to a real expert that's actually done the things that you're talking about, because you hear a lot of shows where they haven't actually done what they're talking about, or maybe they've kind of faked it a little bit. So this show is real experts, which I love. So I'm glad that you gave us those numbers. So now you're kind of consulting, and you also have, I believe, a tool called Just Reach Out. Can you tell us quickly about that?
Yeah, so over 9 years now I've been consulting, and it's been fun because I've been working with different companies, and they all are very different service offerings, so it challenges me appropriately, and I like to be challenged. But I can only take so many consulting clients. And I've toyed with the idea of growing it into an agency, and at one point during these 9 years I had over 5 employees, and we're doing a lot of projects all at once. And selling time for money has not been at the heart of what I want to do. I haven't been the most passionate about this. It's a little bit of a grind. And so what I found is that most startups can actually do what I do for them by themselves and not pay me tons of money, for consulting and services, because it takes me a lot of time to do all this stuff for them. And I can only do maybe by myself, I can do maybe 2-3 companies at a time. And if I hire other people, maybe each one of them can do 1 or 2. But we can only take in a set amount of clients. And it becomes a numbers game. How many people can you hire, and how many projects can you take on? And so I decided to build a SaaS business, basically. Just Reach Out is a SaaS platform. And it says, when you arrive on the website, it says, forget PR firms. Pitch relevant influencers and journalists yourself. And that's what it does for you. So it's basically a marketing, it's a substitute for content marketing. So whether it's a Quora thread that you need to answer, you can check a Quora thread box for the search, and you can say, look, I only want to answer Quora threads on my topic, which is SEO. And this thing will front up opportunities for you to answer right now, this very second, to promote your skills because you're really good at SEOs. Or you can say Reddit, and it'll say, all right, only Reddit discussions in this topic that are most uploaded, and it'll show you only those. But maybe you actually are ready to chat with people who are writing content out there about your topic, about SEO, about the best practices of SEO, whatever you do. So then you type in SEO techniques or SEO, whatever the keyword may be, and you can experiment with that. You can type in your competitors' key names or something like that. And you can see who's mentioning these words, who's writing about these topics, and you can contact them. So you can click contact, and the tool will show you the best pitch angles to use. We have over 9 different pitch angles that are best fit for each given journalist, and their email address, their contact information. And it really helps you take control of your PR activities. So every day you're answering some Quora and Reddit questions. At the same time, you're sending out a few pitches a day about different things that you want covered by bloggers, by influencers, by journalists. And we push people to do things such as guest articles. We push people to do things such as infographics. And we try and get people away from pitching their products and services to get covered by influencer journalists. So the minute we see people are pitching that, we say, look, can you please change this to something where you create the content and you submit it to that publication? So we really are trying to change the way people approach PR, but in a sense, it's basically my consulting and in a product form. It's I've digested pretty much everything I've learned into this tool that basically helps you get your content out, get your story out there, and you actually do the work. You are the one that's doing it. You're not hiring an outside consultant. You're not hiring a coach. Or you're not hiring anybody else but this tool. And this tool just gives you opportunities and ideas of how you can get your story out there. And it's up to you to craft the story and get it out there. And I'm just sitting here supporting everybody I can by going back and forth on pitch templates, how your pitch is formed. I use Zendesk a lot, and I have a staff of real reporters and journalists, veteran reporters and journalists, who have agreed to answer support so that people that get feedback from us actually get feedback from real journalists who've received pitches most of their lifetime. And so we're just helping people get away from PR firms, marketing agencies, just do all this stuff yourself, content marketing, PR. Yeah,
it sounds like a really great tool. I definitely want to go ahead and check that out right after we finish recording the show. So these are businesses actually contacting like journalists and things like that themselves. So what are mistakes that you commonly see them make when they're trying to DIY this process?
So the common mistake, and we just recently launched on AppSumo, and it was a wild ride, and we've gotten a huge influx of new paying customers from it, thousands. And we've been servicing a lot of ticket support and tickets that came in. And the number one question people say is, listen, I'm sending out a pitch, and the pitch is the following. Hey, Joy, I was just reading your article about education secretary resigning. We created something that challenges the status quo of education. Here's our app, and here's how we work, and here are all the details about what we're doing. We're launching soon. We'd love for you to give us some feedback and maybe cover us when we're ready. And it becomes a very one-sided pitch all about this company.
What can they take?
Yeah, and it's very hard for this journalist to really identify with it. The whole thing is all about them and not the journalist. So my common response is saying, would you actually say this to this person Joy, if you actually were standing there right next to her and you guys were in line at a conference getting lunch together, and you just turned around and you said, hey Joy, I was just reading your article would you actually say it? And no, that the answer is no. And I would say, write something that you would actually say to her. Like, you don't know her, she doesn't know you, you guys just started corresponding. How would you start a conversation that's engaging with a person? Now, you have the time on your side. You have all these resources, research resources that you can kind of find. What is she like? What has she been tweeting about? What kind of interest does she have? What has she been writing recently about? People just... I have a pitch today that came in. It was to a Huffington Post reporter. It turns out this person is one of the executives is Charles Schwab, who happened to write a contributor article to Huffington Post. And this pitch was aimed at her to say, hey, we have a new app coming out. Would you cover us? People don't even look at the bios of these journalists or influencers they're reaching out to. They just want their stuff covered. And so my job is I'm trying to get people to think in a relationship development kind of standpoint, and not so much, hey, I want you to cover my stuff. And that may be commenting on their article. It could be answering a question on Quora and actually referencing your answer and asking them on feedback or anything they would add to your answer on Quora. That could be a great way to start discussing something and collaborating with somebody or who's an influencer or a blogger on an answer together, or a common Reddit thread together, which you can develop further into a conversation, and at some point they will ask you what you do. You're not supposed to I wouldn't say, don't pitch yourself up front like that. And there are places for that too. If it's super on the topic and they've just done 3 articles about Kickstarter campaigns and you got a hot one coming up right now and it's timely, by all means, hit them up and tell them what's going on and say, hey, excuse me for such a direct message, but I can see that you've been covering this stuff and this is very timely, right? But if it's, why your service is the greatest thing since sliced bread, it's like, you're just like everybody else who's lining up in that inbox, hundreds and hundreds of people. And so then you got to take a completely different approach. You got to do a Quora thing where you're answering it, you're asking them for more feedback. You might do a guest article, invest some time into writing the guest article for that publication, publish it, engage with them over that guest article, ask them for feedback on how you could improve it, be humble, and say, look, I published for my first article on TechCrunch or the Next Web or Search Engine Land or whatever, and this is my first one. How would you make it better? People love to give opinions and feedback. So, especially if you're humble. So that's the biggest mistake people make. It's like, I want to talk about what I do up front. I want my stuff promoted, and I'm talking to somebody who has potential to do it. So I'm just going to say it up front. I'm just going to tell them straight up what I want. And it's not always the best case, the best scenario. So
yeah, I see that mistake all the time. I'm the victim of that mistake as well, quite often. So just playing devil's advocate a little and flipping it around, besides just the grunt work and the hours that a PR company can put into helping a business, are there any other assets or advantages that a PR company or consultant or agency has doing the PR work? Like, is it relationships, or what really is the advantage of having, if any, an actual PR company helping?
Well, a PR firm, you're hiring a PR firm to craft a message, a storyline for you too. So they're the ones who are putting together the actual story around what you do and trying to relate that to the media. That's, if I have news about Mayor of Toronto smoking crack, I probably don't need a PR agency to get the news out. I think if I sit down and start emailing a bunch of publications, the news will spread like fire and everybody will just start talking about it. If I have a story of, a remote database company that's launching a new feature, it's like, it's a yawner that nobody really wants to write about. That's when a PR company comes in and says, okay, this is definitely the dullest thing since we've heard since ever. We need to figure out how to spruce this baby up. And we're going to try and think of different ways. Maybe we create 10 ways database administrators quit. And we're going to do some kind of crazy, some kind of videos. And they're going to be funny. They're going to be like funny skits. We're going to publish it on BuzzFeed. And then we're going to link up to our remote database company or something like that. Or the worst disasters of 20th century in database admin. Or some kind of... So that's what the PR agency comes in, or PR firm or consultants. And they're good at that because they can they know what will work and what won't when it comes to different publications or different forums like Reddit, and they can piece together that story. But what I'm trying to do is train people. So I have a course that kind of comes along with the tool, Just Reach Out. It's an online course, and it just shows people how I've done it over these 9 years. So I'm trying to train people to understand how to do this stuff on their own, and it's not too much of rocket science. It's a lot of experimenting, but I would say it just works. So Just Reach Out itself is trying to get at that as well. So we have 9 pitch templates that you can cycle through. Each pitch template is a very different pitch angle, and so it gets people thinking different ways they can kind of position their story and what they can do. And our support is also designed to do that. So our staff, they're all reporters, so they're trying to provoke people on that story. But yeah, the PR agencies, they'll be okay or good crafting that story. Some are better than others. They have those relationships. That's what people pay them the big bucks for.
How much of an asset is that really?
But it's not. Yeah, I've worked with PR agencies, probably at least 20 of them in my career, and every time I've been just horribly disappointed. Their contacts get pitches from all their clients, and they understand that these clients pay them a lot of money to send these pitches on their behalf. And so they become jaded. They become kind of not very excited about what they get from these PR agencies, but they still read the pitches. It just becomes, the pitches themselves become a little mundane and not fresh, because what's happening is a firm is coming to the PR agency. A PR agency isn't living inside the firm. They don't really know the firm. They do a few interviews. They learn some things about the firm, and they deduce certain keywords, certain things that they might think, all right, maybe we can try this. They'll create some pitch angles, some storylines, and then they'll go and try and pitch those things to their contacts. And so because they don't know the firm that well, even if a reporter journalist comes back, that conversation just ends up being kind of really hard to handle for the PR firm. So they might connect them through, but a lot of times they don't want to. But the idea is that they have these contacts, and the same contacts receive pitches from all these different clients through them. And so
there can be a negative aspect to that as well, is what you're saying. Yeah. Is maybe they're tired of hearing from the same firm or the same person all the time.
Yeah, it just kind of gets dated. And it's just, it's something that they've been working with that person for a while, and sure that works, but a fresh approach, like where the entrepreneur is reaching out and it's grassroots and they're right there and they're the one pitching, it becomes much more personable for reporters and journalists. And frankly, building those relationships up for the entrepreneurs is invaluable, and people don't want to do it. Most people want somebody else to do it for them, and they don't really think ahead. Like, nobody really thinks ahead of building and maintaining all these relationships. And over the 9 years, I've built relationships pretty much with most mainstream media publications. So at this point, I can turn around, and if I want to be in The Guardian and I write a great piece of content, I can put it in The Guardian. I can be in New York Times, or I can be in Gazeta.ru in Russia, because I've built those relationships over time with people there. And when they leave, they introduce me to somebody else there. And that's invaluable to me. Like, if I really wanted to, I can push links and things all over the place. I don't try and do that at all, but I try and urge people to do that as much as they can. but it takes time, and nobody really wants to invest time into that kind of stuff. But ultimately, you'll be successful at whatever you do going down the line if you have these relationships with different publications and blogs and influencers. But striking them up is where it's a lot of that work. It's like I answer the core thread and I want them to give me some feedback, but they're busy and it might not be on topic with them, so I got to try again. And it's like dating, you know. Like some people find somebody they're happy with, and some people don't, and some people break up or whatever. So dating is a great analogy to it.
And that's why for everyone listening out there, this is why time and effort is your asset and advantage. Because so many people, like you said, are not willing to put that time and effort in, that if you do just even a little bit more, or hopefully considerably more, then you have a huge advantage. So that's a really great point. So I want to take us to an article that you did. It's called A Step-by-Step DIY Guide to Get Press for Your Startup Without Spending a Penny. This is just I read this article and it completely blew my mind. It's got a lot of shares, and I want to talk through maybe not the whole thing, but since I want to give the listeners some tactical things, I want to at least talk through some of the points here. And of course, they can go to the article to get the whole picture. But let's start talking through this and what some of these step-by-step items are. The article begins with a really cool reply from Gary Vaynerchuk. He's replying to you on Product Hunt, and he's saying, I think PR is rethought. It used to be a B2B business. It's now B2C. And I imagine that must kind of lead into your post. Can you take us from there and just set up the post and give us the first step, and we'll kind of go through maybe the first handful of steps in this post?
Yeah, so I mean, Gary's a great guy. He's just a monster. He takes like 7-minute meetings, and he's right here in New York City. And he just hit the nail on the head. You know, B2B has transitioned to B2C, which means, businesses traditionally, they used to kind of go after other businesses, and a lot of them are trying to go after consumers. And so you're expanding your PR strategy to something completely different. No longer are you hiring big PR agencies or big communication expert companies or big names to represent you. You are actually going grassroots. You're trying to communicate with influencers and journalists and people of stature on your own. And some people might have agents or whatever still, but it's transitioning into a world where startups, entrepreneurs, or anybody out there, they should be, establishing those relationships and maintaining them on their own. And SEO has transitioned to this as well. So a lot of the SEO used to be making sure your title tags are all correctly placed together, and just put your site up and it's perfectly shaped for Google to index you, and they index you, and boom, you start popping up in those search results. And there used to be all sorts of crazy link stuff people did, but now it's become relationships. It's become what kind of relationships do you have with different influencers, publications, and so forth, who can link to you, who can help you, get your content out there. And so PR is like that. So basically what the article starts out saying is, hey, you got to own your PR efforts. You can't just keep outsourcing it, because you'll never own those relationships, and those relationships are crucial to your success. When you fire that PR firm or you fire that consultant because they're too expensive for you, you lose everything you've done up until that point, because those relationships go with that person. You might try and build a relationship that they kind of started establishing between you and somebody else, but you don't own it.
It's never the same, yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it dives, so naturally the first step is like dating, how do you build a relationship with journalists and influencers? And it goes through the research methodology that I use. I kind of outline it, and then I dive deep into it in my course. But the idea is, just like with anything, it's not rocket science. It's just finding a common point of interest with somebody who you want to promote you. And that common point of interest cannot be your service offering or product. So the first thing is really what is that common point of interest that is of interest to them, of interest to you, and it has nothing to do with what you're selling.
And is this the section we're in, just so everyone knows where they are if they're looking at your post? Are we in step 1? The first step is nailing your one sentence value proposition. Are we in that area?
It's starting out that in that area. So so that is sort of like the first step. There is the one sentence pitch. That is really crucial to you forming that common interest. So if you can't describe what you do in one sentence, and by the way, there's a great template for it. I usually say my company, then I put name, like Just Reach Out is developing, offering, helping entrepreneurs pitch press on their own to help target audience.
We'll embed this template in the show notes as well. Yeah. But it's my company.
It's a great little template. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just read it because the interesting thing about podcasts, just to step aside for a second, that I'm kind of learning and thinking is a lot of people who wouldn't read this blog post are going to listen to this podcast. So this podcast can almost substitute in a way them looking at this post. Wow. In it, because they might consume content audio and not be big readers. So I'm just going to read the whole template here, and because I think it's great anyways. It says, my company name is developing offering to help target audience solve problem with a secret sauce. And those fields are templated so you can fill those in.
Yeah. And so, you start there by figuring out how can you say what you do in one sentence. And then you transition that to this little kind of questionnaire that I ask myself a lot is, can it be pitched in a subject line? Okay, you've got my attention. Now, can you keep it? Can you express this in terms of what I understand, kind of like would my grandma understand this thing? Why are you telling me this story? It kind of hits upon the common interest. And why does this matter to my audience? What's the narrative? How does it flow? So those questions kind of lead from what you do to that common interest that you have with a journalist or an influencer that you want to start talking to. Remember, you don't want to start talking about what you do, but you should have a one-sentence pitch of what you do, because that will start to kind of, as you asking these questions that I listed in the article, why are you telling me the story? Why does it matter to my audience? What's the narrative? How does it flow? So you're developing that common interest story that might be familiar to you and your sort of influencer, whoever you want to start.
And this is before you even contact anybody. You need to know your message before you.
Yeah, definitely.
And then in your next step, you have, and stop me if I'm jumping ahead, you have making a list of contacts of journalists.
Yes. Yeah. So that is really important, because you want to find the right people who are talking about the topic of common interest that you've come up with. And so in my space, it's startup PR. And so I'm really passionate about it. And so I might search Google News for people who are ranking top on startup PR and try and find blogs and influencers or bloggers or journalists who are writing about this stuff. And I try, I want to connect with them. And I actually want to connect with them and tell them how I go about PR, because it's a very different approach to PR. I might not talk about Just Reach Out. I probably won't talk about my consulting, but I might engage with them and say, listen, like, a lot of people still stick with PR firms paying tons of money and they don't establish relationships on their own. It looks like you're in that camp. It's really hard to tell from this article. Would love to hear which camp you're in. Establish relationships on your own or do PR. And I might do some research behind who they are. And that's where I say, look, do as much research as you can. If I'm researching and I find out that this person is actually a PR consultant and they're a contributor to Entrepreneur magazine and they've written this article about PR, chances are this person might get pretty offended if I say that PR firms are going to die. And if I send them any kind of messaging about forget PR firms, probably not the best thing. But I might not know that. When I first hit their content up on Entrepreneur, I might say, hey, this person looks like a great journalist. They write about hacking PR. They'd totally be down to chat about killing PR firms. So like, just do some homework. It's a pretty basic kind of Google spreadsheet that I link up where I just have their name, their date of their article, link to their article, their Twitter profile, and their personal website or something personal about them that kind of describes who they are, what they've done, what kind of things do they write about, just so I can kind of have a handle on who this person is and how I can engage with them. Just a little bit of intel for me to compose some type of outreach or pitch to them.
Aside from Google News, are there any other places you find yourself using to find journalists?
Well, so Just Reach Out is built to do that. So I found that it was difficult for me to go and use multiple sources, but I always tell people to start at Google News just because it's timely and it's pretty relevant. I use Google or Google News as just so basic. There are tons of different. You can use BuzzSumo, for example. BuzzSumo is a tool that shares most relevant and most shared articles in any given topic.
How do you feel about these tools like Harrow?
Yeah, so Harrow, Peter Shankman is a great friend of ours. He's actually an advisor to Just Reach Out. Harrow presents, there's tons of these tools now. Journal requests, I think, is another one. There's a hashtag called journalist requests or something like that, and these people just parse the hashtag, and any blogger who's writing about anything tweets their kind of wanted an SEO expert for an article, hashtag journal requests, and this tool pulls that into a nice little newsletter. The thing about these newsletters that you get so many of them and you got to parse through all of them, and it's very hard to understand what are the websites rankings like and who are the people behind these requests. Am I talking to some guy who just has a Medium who he just put up and he's writing some kind of new blog post? It was his second article. Or am I talking to like New York Times? So a lot of these sort of like Harrow type of request letters, they're legitimate. They're people that are writing about something and they want an expert opinion on it. The problem with that is that you're spending a whole bunch of time trying to get to them, respond to their questions and give info, and you don't know what the results of this whole thing will be. And so what we started doing with Just Reach Out is really looking at the most shared content out there, content that's getting the most shares and the most engagement, and showing that as top results. So we just haven't been able to find that type of information and tailor it to the given topic. And so, so there's a handful of tools out there that are trying to do similar things. There's, Ninja Reach Out. There is all sorts of InkBee. There's all these like blogger classification tools that are trying to like classify blogs. Here are the blogs you should be reaching out to, but they don't give you individuals within those blogs who you should talk to. So we focus on the individual themselves, who they are, their bio and stuff, and then we front up all the content they've written about that topic. So
awesome. Yeah. So then the next step is, once you know the journalist, and we're getting into some nitty gritty, can you give us some quick tips on finding email addresses? I see there's a few things in your post here. Yeah,
so this is something that we kind of solve with Just Reach Out, and it does it automatically when you hit contact. But basically, getting somebody's email address is not that hard. Distilled, I think, did a crazy post a long time ago, how to find anybody's email. It became the most popular post out there for this kind of thing. But the idea is that most places you can kind of guess what their format is. It's first name dot last name, first initial last name at company. You can try different combinations and get to the right one. Email Hunter has been indexing emails for a long time, and so they can give you pretty much, here are 20 different pages that I found for this email at Forbes, and you can look at it and say it's N. Weinberg, so it looks like it's first initial last name. And if you can see enough of these emails that it has indexed at Forbes, for example, you can see that all of them are in the same type of format. So you can deduce from that, hey, anybody who actually works for Forbes has this email. It's their first initial last name at Forbes.com. Now, Forbes has a lot of contributors, so you have to be careful because a lot of contributors don't have Forbes.com emails. They contribute to the publication. They're not like actual writers or journalists working for it. So then you kind of revert to Gmail, and a lot of these people, you can type in the first name dot last name at gmail.com into your Gmail search, and you can see if that little avatar comes up during search. You don't have to contact people at all. You can just see if you search for that and that email address that you type into search matches up to any Google Plus profile. It'll show up on top of Google Plus for Google Plus email, and it'll show the person in Gmail for you. The other service is Cellhack. I love Ryan, and he's been a good friend of mine. And
what's
so
the
email
service again?
Cellhack. SELL hack HACK. They've been around.
Yep.
Yeah, they've been around for a while, and they do similar things to Email Hunter. So I wouldn't use both of them, but they're a great service, and they've been around and doing what they're doing a whole lot longer. And I would say they actually did what Email Hunter is doing now a long time ago, and Email Hunter is a French company. They're based in France, so certain laws and regulations don't apply to them. So they can put an overlay plugin into your LinkedIn profile, and it can have people just click a button on any LinkedIn profile and let you just crank and find you the address of that person who you're looking at on LinkedIn.
Yep.
So that's actually against terms of service, I guess, on LinkedIn, against some of the laws here in the U.S. about email. But Cellhack is a U.S. company, so they can't, they can't do that legally. And I think, Email Hunter, I don't know if that's even legal for them to do it, but somehow they've been getting away with it, putting those buttons all over if you have the plugin installed, it'll just automatically put a button on any profile and just let you look at them.
Yeah, it's rare I'm not able to find somebody's email address these days with the method you said or a tool or something. So there's a lot of great tools there. So I want to talk about one more part of your article, and then we'll jump to some other topics and questions. But I think the part I want to wrap up with the article here, and then people can go read it to get the rest of it. But you talk about write a banging email pitch, and you say that 81% of journalists prefer to be pitched by email. So let's get that out of the way. Like, you want to pitch by email, most likely. And there's some templates and advice, but it just, in your words, what makes a banging email pitch to journalists?
So yeah, I have a macro in Zendesk because after AppSumo launched, we got thousands of people who became our paying customers. So all of them started writing email pitches, and I just got tired responding to everybody they were like, I want a great pitch, and here's my pitch, and can you improve it for me? That's the number one question people ask when they use our service. And I get through probably at least a couple hundred emails a day doing tickets, so a couple hundred on my own.
So you're reading emails that your customers are trying to pitch so you're reading what people are trying to do while they're learning.
Yeah. So I generally so the first thing I do is I actually read the email out. A lot of my pitches, I go into a conference room like this one, I read the whole thing out loud, and I just try and imagine that person who's receiving it and trying to understand like their expression on their face. Like, they have lots of email. When are you sending? Are you sending in the morning, in the evening? Like, what's their day looking like? What's their email box looking like? What do they have to do that day? And what do they have to get through? And so you're using that buzzword everyone uses now, empathy, to try to put yourself in their shoes. Yeah.
And I love, can you speak to that a little bit more? Because I think this is the area that I'm guessing a lot of people get confused with, is they're not thinking about the person reading an email that's being distracted by somebody over their shoulder. So you're actually trying to visualize yourself in that journalist's shoes. Yeah.
So my good friend Rebecca wrote a great piece on Medium, and I'll send it to you after the interview. But she outlined her day-to-day like this. She said, I get up in the morning, I have to check email, tons of pitches from people. I got to get 4 articles out today. So my editor is on my ass trying to get this thing out the door. 4 articles. Some new announcements came in about funding that we have to cover. It's from big companies, and I got to get on that. So that adds a few more. I'm just trying to scramble through stuff as people text me, IM me, email me. I'm trying to get through these 4 articles and this 5th extra one to get through the day. I barely have time to look at the news or what's going on at all. And then it's midnight, and then I'm just going to bed, and tomorrow will be another day. And, I fell asleep, and I missed the news of Steve Jobs dying, and we had, nobody covering that story. And then, we were the last ones to report on it, and I scrambled, and I felt so bad, but I just literally had to sleep. And so it's just such an exhausting position to be in. If you're a real reporter and you're writing news, you're always never done, and the sense of accomplishment is just, you're struggling to keep up with things constantly. You have to report on things. You don't always write about stuff you want, and you're always trying to get one leg up. And so to have a praise from somebody, or somebody comment on something you actually did without pitching themselves to you, is very rare. When people email you, generally they want something from you. Nobody gives you stuff. Even if you get samples of products or things that are out there for free, it's still, people want something in return. Like they send me a cool sample, they'll probably want me to cover them. Or people always have some kind of motive to contact me as a reporter or journalist. And so I just get weary of people reaching out to me. It becomes too mundane. I switch emails. I get overwhelmed. I get sick of it. I don't want to hear anymore from people. I have my own workday to get through. I will judge what is important and what is not. And I don't want more email. And every day I get more and more email. And it's just a mess. They hate it. They hate the email thing. They hate tons of pitches, and it really sucks. It really sucks to be a reporter, doing this kind of work. Granted, you're writing stuff, and people know you, and you're a bit of a personality, so people know who you are, so it's a big deal. But having that mentality and knowing who they are and what's going on in their life could just help you figure out how to establish a connection with them, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just pitching what you do to them day to day and trying to follow up and ask them if they found your email and read it, just try to talk to them about something that they really, really find passionate and care about. And it could be asking them for advice or feedback on something that you've written about, but it could be implementing their advice or their opinions and then showing them how you implemented them, for example. Or they're writing about something and they're giving advice on what to do. Try to implement that and show them how that turned out, or how your friend did it. Or heck, maybe create a guest article and quote them in it, and then promote what they've written independent of what they do, and try and get that article published somewhere else. Include their article in the comment thread on Quora or Reddit and get that promoted to get them more views. So how can you bring more value, become an assistant to them almost, to help them do what they do daily, So that's always my thought behind it, is how can you improve what they do? And
I'm glad we dug in there, because those last few things you said, I hope people listen through the episode. Those were gold, that advice, I think, because the few things you said about quoting them and putting in an article and getting it promoted, that helps them. But also the one about helping support a stance or something that they believe in or have put forth is super powerful. And I don't think a lot of people do that, because it takes effort, right? It's something that requires more energy to do. So I love that. And I appreciate your extra thoughts on having empathy towards journalists. Yeah. So one hesitation that I found myself having in my mind, and probably other people, is that, okay, so I find something this journalist is interested in. Maybe I engage with them on Reddit or interact with them on Twitter. Two things, I guess, come to mind. One, am I being disingenuous by maybe like kind of pretending I'm interested in something they're interested in? And then number two, if we're not even talking about the topic that I care about for my business, how does it lead to that?
Yeah, so I guess disingenuous, in a sense, I try to be, I don't want to be too far off when I reach out and just start establishing a relationship based on pretty much nothing and lying about my interest. I might embellish my interest a little in their given topic, but it has to really resonate with what your true interests are. But in terms of relationships and when do they begin to bear fruit, it's different in any circumstance. So I like to take it like gradual steps one at a time. So I might keep providing value until they ask me. That's the best way. So until they ask you what you do, you keep providing some type of value, giving them a heads up about something you saw that they might be interested in, introducing them to somebody who might be an expert for one of their future articles, correcting their spelling mistakes. Keep doing that type of activity. But I would think the more you bring value, the more of a chance they will respond to you and finally ask you something about what you do. If you find a way, a lot of times I end up going the guest article route, and where I push people to write guest articles in the field. It might not be for that same publication that a journalist writes about. If it is, it's great. But it might be something that's much, less popular.
So when you're saying going the guest article route, can you explain that a little bit more? So how does that help us get in touch with the journalist?
So I go and I publish an article, not on TechCrunch, but I'll publish it on Search Engine Land or marketingprofs.com. And it'll be about the best way to do PR outreach. And I will contact the person at TechCrunch and say, listen, I'm very new to PR space and contacting journalists. So I write a little bit. And so I started, my very first guest article was featured on Search Engine Land. It was a big deal for me. But I was wondering if you could give me feedback on how I wrote it, because is it valuable enough for the readers? You've been a veteran writer. You've written for a long time. And I know that you write 3-4 articles a day, and it took me a month to write this one. And can you give me some pointers on how do I make my content better, more engaging, and also how do you crank through so many articles a day? Do you have some kind of process you go through? That type of thing. And then in general, this content that I wrote about how to pitch a journalist, does this seem like a genuine process to go through for entrepreneurs? Would you add anything to this? And so that might strike up a conversation that's related to my tool, Just Reach Out. But it's not necessarily, pitching my service or what I do. It's a guest article I wrote that kind of talks a little bit about what I do, but it doesn't really talk about the service or anything like that. It just gives it a whole outline. I could pretty much do that with my own blog, right? Mm-hmm. But it kind of, it sounds better. It gives them another reason to reply is when it's on another publication that's kind of sort of well known. So you're
leveraging the notoriety of that platform to help get their attention.
Help. Yeah,
and
because if you're go ahead.
So people don't get confused because we're talking about PR and you're writing about PR. Let's use another example. So let's say I do Facebook advertising as a service. I might write about that on Social Media Examiner and then reach out to what kind of journalist would I then reach out to and ask for this kind of advice?
So I might reach out to a blogger. It depends what you're trying to promote, but like you go to Marketing Land or Search Engine Land or I don't know, some kind of marketing centric blog or and try and say, look, like you write about marketing and SEO. I wrote an article on Social Media Examiner that got a number of shares, but I don't know about my approach. What would you think about this approach? We would love to solicit your feedback on it. And by the way, I'm writing a new article, and this one will be for the next web, and I'd love to get a tweet or a little quote from you to include in there. So it's like, okay, give me some feedback on this article I wrote on Social Media Examiner. You're a reporter or journalist who writes for Search Engine Land, and I'll promote you personally in my next article, which will be for a bigger publication. Now, I don't know if my article will be ever accepted on the next web, but it's nice to say that you're writing one, and it sounds interesting. And since I already published one on Search Engine Land, maybe I'll get mine up on the other website as well. And so the guest article route is really publish your guest article anywhere, and the more notoriety there is on the domain where you publish it, the better you are. If you can't do it anywhere, just publish it on your own website. Awesome advice. I want to just kind of wrap things up. Just in general, how important is it, do you think, for a business to be writing on a site like Entrepreneur or Forbes or Huffington Post? Aside from getting the attention of journalists, would you say that's just important in general? Yes, I think SEO has transitioned into basically relationships. So it's what type of authoritative websites are pointing to your website, to your blog, to your content. And these people are, like in the words of Brian Dean, link creators. These people are authoritative sites that are pointing to you. And one of the ways that you can get those authoritative sites to point to you is to guest write for them. Now, when you guest write, you don't actually link to your own website, but you have a bio. And in the bio, you get a link back to what you do. That link is essential. It's really important for you to have that link pointing back to your site so that your rankings can keep climbing. But the first link is the most important. The second isn't as important. And then you can kind of speak to that probably better than me. But I think of it as always as how many different websites that are authoritative do I have pointing to me? And asking somebody else to write something about you is a big ask. Writing something that is of stature or teaching somebody else on your own and getting it featured on another publication is a smaller ask. It's not just nothing. It's still an ask. It's a decent type of ask, but you do the hard work there, and you just try and pray and make sure that the content you've written is the better content that they have there. And you pray that the editors understand that and they include it. And so it's very important, I think, to do guest writing for these big publications. Because you get those links. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think we're going to start to wrap things up. I really appreciate your time today. I hope all the listeners took away some really great tactical tips. I know that I did. Where would you like to direct people on the web who want to check out you or your product or your blog? Where can they go? Yeah, just go to justreachout.io. That's the tool, kind of like the PR stuff. There's links there to everything, like the blog, the bio, everything is kind of linked off of that. If you want to learn more about me and kind of my background consulting, criminally prolific. Criminally prolific is exactly how you spell it. And criminally prolific. Cool domain name. Where does that come from? My wife gave a name to my consulting. So when we moved to California and I started consulting that first day, she's like, "Listen, you're just so prolific. It's criminal." And we were laughing about it. And I'm like, "Yeah, tell me about it." Yeah, like I'm quitting my career as software engineer, starting this crazy thing in California. And she's like, "No, you're just so prolific." And so I just registered it, and yeah, so that I had it since then. Clever. I like it. All right, everyone. I hope you took notes, and if you didn't, you can of course go to evolvingseo.com/wire for all of the show notes. The next episode, we're going to have Rhea Drysdale from Outspoken Media talking all about content marketing
in ways that are very different than prior episodes thus far. So there's really little to no overlap. So I highly suggest that you tune into that. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Experts on the Wire, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Music by me.